The war in Ukraine is not going very well for the Biden administration. Michael Snyder reports, Joe Biden has repeatedly stated that the U.S. is going to be involved in the war in Ukraine, quote, for as long as it takes, end quote, and our leaders just keep pouring billions upon billions of dollars into the conflict. But the truth is that the war is not going very well for Ukraine. After sending them lots of shiny new vehicles and enormous mountains of military equipment in recent months, U.S. officials pressured the Ukrainians to launch an ill-advised counteroffensive so that the public could see that some progress was being made. Unfortunately for the Ukrainians, the Russian defensive positions are extremely well prepared at this stage, and thousands upon thousands of young Ukrainians have been needlessly slaughtered. An Irish volunteer that recently returned home told Sky News what life is really like on the front lines at this point. Sky News International correspondent John Sparks spoke to an Irish volunteer, Rhys Byrne, who has been fighting on the front line in the east of Ukraine for 17 months and is now leaving Ukraine due to witnessing atrocities. Sparks reports Byrne called the fighting he witnessed horrific. On Zero Line, it's horror, there is just a genocide, it's slaughter, says Rhys Byrne, codename Rambo, a 28-year-old from Dublin. Byrne fought for the 59th Brigade in the Ukrainian Territorial Army, where he operated a heavy machine gun, Sparks reports. There are victims everywhere, Russians and Ukrainian people. The biggest problem we get when we're going into trenches is stepping over all of these bodies that are already there from the last people who went in. That kind of stuff really haunts you, he says. Try to imagine what it would be like in there. How would you feel if there were bodies all around you for as far as the eye could see? Sadly, our military leaders don't seem to care that much at all of the Ukrainians that are victims to this. They are more than happy to fight this war to the last Ukrainian as long as U.S. troops don't have to die. If the American people truly understand what's going on over there, a lot more of them would be pushing for a peaceful solution. During an interview on Tuesday, Donald Trump tried to get people to understand the scale of carnage that we are witnessing. According to Trump, hundreds of thousands of people are dying. Trump again reiterated that he wants the war to end immediately, noting, "You have cities with no buildings standing. It looks like a demolition zone. It's so horrible, and you know that." And then they'll say 2 people were hurt. No, hundreds of people and thousands of people were hurt. And victims to this, you're going to find out when this whole thing is over that the number of people is far greater than they tell you, Trump further urged. And he says, they're not telling you the truth. Many, many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people dying, and their cities are being obliterated. So many lives are being needlessly ended. The vast majority of them are either Ukrainians or foreign mercenaries that have been hired to fight for the Ukrainians. After the horrifying losses that the Ukrainians have suffered during their recent counteroffensive, some Western news sources are now changing their tune about this war. In fact, a major British news source just posted an article entitled "Ukraine and the West are facing a devastating defeat." Since Putin's tanks crossed into Ukraine territory last year, 3 options have been on the table for how this war would end: victory for one side or the other, a frozen conflict, or a negotiated settlement. The public comments made this week by Oleksiy Orestovich, a former advisor to Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff, appeared to indicate the last may be more likely than previously thought. Arestovich raised the prospect of Ukraine making territorial concessions in return for the rest of the country receiving the most cast-iron security guarantee there is, NATO membership. These comments have proved highly controversial. Not only would such an outcome be unpalatable to many in Kiev and other European capitals, raising it as a possibility highlights a growing uncertainty about the long-term sustainability of the war, particularly amongst Ukraine's Western backers. But there will be no peace talks. The Biden administration is going to make sure of that. So the fighting will continue, and now the Russians have gathered an absolutely massive force of an offensive of their own. Russia is amassing vast numbers of troops and equipping along the northern front line in Ukraine, Kiev has warned. Serhiy Cherevati, spokesperson for the Eastern Group of Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, told local television that Moscow had gathered more than 100,000 troops on the Lyman-Kupiansk axis, as well as 900 tanks, 555 artillery systems, and 370 multiple rocket launchers. It's been reported that the Russian force has already advanced 2 kilometers in the direction of Kupiansk, and a foreign news source is telling us that the Ukrainians have already lost more than 55 square kilometers of territory. Already the Russian troops advanced in the last 24 hours 2 kilometers along the front and 1.5 kilometers in depth. In the last 3 days, the armed forces of Ukraine have lost more than 55 square kilometers of territory. At the same time, the Russian troops of the 21st Mechanized Guards Division have created 2 brigade bridgeheads which they intend to unite. Russian forces crossed the Zeberets River southwest of Karmazinovka in Svatovo and west of Novovodiyane. The Ukrainians later confirmed the crossing of the Zeberets River by the Russians. The Russians now see the city of Kupiansk. This was not supposed to happen. The Biden administration assured us that the Ukrainian counteroffensive would be a great success, but now the Russians are gaining ground. So what is the next move for the Biden administration? Are they ready to commit U.S. troops to the fight? And would U.S. troops actually be ready for such a fight? Over the past few years, the Biden administration has turned the U.S. military into one giant social experiment. For example, one 18-year-old female recruit claims that she was actually forced to shower and sleep between 2 individuals who were supposedly changing from male to female. According to Rounds, the military recruit 18 is complaining about being forced to sleep in between 2 individuals who were supposedly changing from male to female. The girl also has to shower with individuals that reported significant distress about the matter. The individuals housed with the 18-year-old had initiated chemical intervention to change genders, but without having reassignment surgery. Their genitalia were fully intact. And according to an incredibly shocking document that was just leaked, transgender recruits are being given all sorts of special privileges. 1. Taxpayer-funded care for transgender service members includes speech-voice therapy, cross-sex hormones, laser hair removal, voice feminization surgery, facial contouring, body contouring, breast-chest surgery, upper surgery, genitalia mutilation surgery, lower surgery, psychological counseling. 2. Service members who identify as transgender may receive a waiver for grooming and uniform standards. 3. Service members who identify as transgender may receive an indefinite waiver for physical fitness standards. This waiver often becomes a de facto permanent situation, and the transgender identified service member just has to renew the exemption request every 6 months. 4. Service members who identify as transgender will be considered non-deployable for up to 300 days while taking hormones for their transition period. Again, given that these hormones are often required for life, this may render the transgender identifying service member as permanently unable to deploy. If you will recall, the U.S. military could not even successfully evacuate from Afghanistan before the Taliban took over the entire country. But now we're going to fight the Russians, quote unquote. One way or another, our soldiers better get ready because more war is coming. Less than a week ago, Joe Biden boldly declared to the entire world that we will not waver and that we will be involved in the conflict in Ukraine for, quote, as long as it takes, end quote. Biden is quite serious about trying to win this war, and in the process he's going to get a whole lot more people victims of this. This is by Michael Snyder. He says about the author, my name is Michael, and my brand new book entitled End Times is now available on Amazon. In addition to my new book, I've written 6 other books available on Amazon, including 7-Year Apocalypse, Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, The Beginning of the End, and Living a Life That Really Matters, Commissions Earned. When you purchase any of these books, you help to support the work that I'm doing, and one way that you can really help is by sending copies as gifts to family and friends. Time is short, and I need help getting these warnings into the hands of as many people as possible. I've also started a brand new Substack newsletter and I encourage you to subscribe so you won't miss any of the latest updates. I've published thousands of articles on the Economic Collapse blog, End of the American Dream, and the Most Important News, and the articles that I publish on those sites are republished on dozens of other prominent websites all over the globe. I always freely and happily allow others to republish my articles on their own websites, but I also ask that they include this about the author section with each article. The material contained in this article is for general information purposes only, and readers should consult licensed professionals before making any legal, business, financial, or health decisions. I encourage you to follow me on social media, Facebook and Twitter, and any way that you can share these articles with others is definitely a great help. These are such troubled times and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. If you have not already done so, I strongly urge you to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. And this is on End of the American Dream by Michael Snyder. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.